Om Sai Ram. We welcome you again for a new chapter today. This is your third chapter from your Sociology PU2 book, and the name of the chapter is Inclusive Strategies. It relates to the last chapter. In the last chapter, that is the second chapter, we talked about what are the areas of inequality in our society. How does this inequality lead to exclusion of certain groups? And now in this chapter, we will study in detail what are the various plans initiated by the government aiming to bring those excluded groups back into the society through these inclusive strategies. Inclusive meaning to include back. It is the opposite of exclusion. And strategy meaning we are planning in a proper manner to achieve certain goals. So, let us see what we are going to do today. So, this is the outline of the entire chapter. It talks about affirmative actions related to SC, ST and women, meaning of affirmative actions, constitutional safeguards, that is to protect the equality of these groups, and developmental measures given by the government, NGO, tribal welfare programs, etc. Then we are going to talk about certain reports that are about gender inequality. So, gender is a new thing which is coming in this chapter, which was not taken up in the last chapter. Women empowerment, again we are going to talk about the gender equality. Then meaning and structure of self-help groups, what are they? We are going to study in this chapter. Microfinance, meaning, features, types and principles, and we will be taking some cases of some organizations that have worked for themselves to bring about this equality. So, these are Shri Shakti, Lijjat Papad and Seva. So, this is the outline of the entire chapter, but what are we going to do today? This chapter analyzes developmental measures taken to uplift the excluded and depressed sections of the society. And the section of the society taken here as who are the depressed classes? We used this term depressed, we used it for SC, that is scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and women. So, what do we already know? So, please recall the last chapter that we did. We already know from that chapter that some sections of the society are depressed or they are lagging behind from the mainstream society due to the practice of social inequality for a very long time. So, they have been excluded from their participation in the developmental process of the nation building due to a long term discrimination against them vis-a-vis equality. So, these particular sections have not been able to come at par with the other sections of the society. So, they are lagging behind, and we have to now see what are the areas they have been lagging behind and what can we do to bring them back. So, exactly what are we going to learn today in this chapter? We are going to discuss the strategies to include the excluded sections back to the society, and under that we will study affirmative actions related to SC, ST and women. So, what are these affirmative actions? We will study. Then meaning of the affirmative actions, then constitutional safeguards to save the interests and that meets out the proper welfare programs for these depressed sections. And we are going to talk about the developmental measures for the upliftment of the scheduled caste. So, basically in this portion that we are going to take, we are going to see what are affirmative actions, what is the meaning of affirmative actions and what are the constitutional safeguards to save the interest of these particular groups. So, here we are going to talk about inclusive strategies, and these are for these depressed sections of the society. These are we are going to take up the issues related to women, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. If you see caste, outcast. So, that caste, the upper caste means leave, remove, what? Outcast. That means we should now take this thing out of our system, this kind of inequality that was prevalent in Indian society. We should remove it now. So, what is the meaning of affirmative actions? Affirmative in English would mean saying yes to something or confirming something. So, here it means it refers to the policies that take factors such as caste, creed, religion or gender into consideration in order to benefit an underrepresented group in the areas of employment, education and business. So, what do we understand by this? That basically these groups which are depressed groups, we are going to bring them up in these areas of employment, education and business. So, these three areas will take care of their well-being. For that reason only we have to bring them up in these areas through these affirmative actions. The nature of the affirmative action policies varies from region to region. So, you will see these kind of affirmative actions are taken over by various countries where these kind of discrimination, disparities prevail, but these policies differ from one region to another region, one country to another country. And in our country, what is the nature of these affirmative actions? We use a system called quota system. What is that quota system? We reserve certain places for these depressed classes, that these will be taken only by those depressed classes for make them to come at the level of the non-depressed classes, to come up in the level equivalent to the other parts of the society. So, whereby a certain percentage of jobs or vacancies are set aside for the members of a race, caste or other protected groups. So, these are now protected groups because they have long been oppressed. So, this affirmative action, where has this term come from? This was first used in United States of America in an executive order signed by the then President John F. Kennedy on March 6, 1961 to combat racial discrimination. So, the President of America John F. Kennedy 1961, he took out this particular term and this was put to execution, that means to practice. Why? To combat racial discrimination. So, what is racial discrimination? It is somewhat like the way we practice caste in our country. Racial discrimination, as you can see from this picture, it is based on color. If not on caste, it is based on color. It is all about whites and black. So, America has had a long history of this kind of racial discrimination. So, American society was colonized by these Britishers, and they were the original natives, blacks. They were taken as the slaves, and obviously equal rights were not given to them. So, what happened over a period of time, this group was facing these kind of discrimination and inequality. So, after a while, after a few years, this group also came together and there was a big protest against this dominance and inequality created by the whites. So, in response to that, there was this particular order that was executed by President John F. Kennedy. But even now in today's society, American society or some European societies, you see this kind of racial discrimination based on color. There was one person called Rosa Parks, under whose condition actually she was denied of certain equality rights. So, under that particular incident, the entire revolution of the blacks, it started against the so called whites. So, how is it in India? So, India we do not talk about race, but we talk about caste and a class. So, people are differentiated on these bases. So, the affirmative action helps to compensate for past discrimination by the ruling class. So, in Indian case, what was the ruling class? Earlier, before independence and during the British time also, the ruling class was the upper caste people. So, and who was discriminated against? The lower caste people were discriminated against. So, now it also addresses the existing discrimination. So, even now some kind of discrimination is still existing. So, the affirmative action in Indian case is still oriented towards removing this kind of discrimination. So, as a response to that, what do we have in India? We have reservation in the form of affirmative action, quota that we talked about. This is designed to improve the well-being of the backward and underrepresented communities. What are underrepresented communities? We have, India follows a democratic system. So, the democracy is the representation of the people. So, this section of people should also represent in the lawmaking, nation building. These people are underrepresented. They are not properly represented in our laws, in the governance of this country. And how they were, this particular underrepresentation was defined primarily by their caste. So, lower caste people would not figure in such policy making situations, in such governance of the country. So, that is to work for the well-being of the backward classes and the scheduled classes. So, this all accounts for the affirmative action that is being taking place in India. So, now we talk about the constitutional safeguards. Upliftment of SC and ST, that is scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So, constitution came into protecting these particular depressed classes. So, the Constitution of India prescribes protection and safeguard for the scheduled caste and tribes and other backward classes. How do they do it? By safeguarding their general rights as citizens. So, now they all belong to this particular country. Nation is more important than their caste, and everybody is the citizen. So, everybody should have equal rights. This is the main idea. Then promoting their educational, economic and political interest. Why promoting? Because they have long been lagging behind. So, now we have to promote it more for them in these areas. So, now and socio-cultural safeguards, that means what? They should not lose out on their socio-cultural aspect. What we did in the last chapter about tribes, that their unique culture was being contaminated by the outside impact. That we do not want to do. We want them to have their culture, their socio-cultural aspects intact, but removing the social disabilities. That should not come in the way of them enjoying the aspect of the development which is being enjoyed by the rest of the society. And providing legal support. This is very important, because law only can fight against any kind of discrimination. So, this kind of support is being provided to them. Now, what are these constitutional provisions related to the above said groups? What are the above said groups? Those SC, ST, depressed classes and women also. So, here we have taken up certain articles from the Constitution of India. These are very important articles for us to realize that Indian Constitution or the Indian governance sees the entire population of India as being equal. So, the state shall not discriminate against any citizens on the grounds of religion, race, caste, gender, place of birth or any of them with regard to. So, you should know that these should not be the basis of our discrimination, which earlier was the case. So, on the basis of religion or race or caste or gender or place of birth, nobody should be denied the access to public restaurant, hotels and places of public entertainment. The use of wells, if you remember, the scheduled caste people were not allowed to use the same well as the upper caste people. So, use of wells, tanks, bathing ghats, roads, etc., and the places of public resort maintained wholly or partly out of state funds. So, these are the public areas dedicated to the use of general public. So, now everybody is allowed to use all these public areas, because they are made from the state funds, and state recognizes equality. Article 16 talks about equality of opportunity for all citizens in the matters related to employment or appointment to any office under the state. So, anybody irrespective of their caste, creed, race, is allowed to seek any employment or appointment in any office under the state, any public employment they can seek and they can get into. Then Article 17 talks about untouchability. So, it was such a big issue in India related to caste. So, now it is abolished under Article 17 and its practices in any form is forbidden. So, the enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability shall be an offence punishable in accordance with the law. Article 23, it talks about illegalizing the traffic in human beings and forced labour. So, what is this traffic in human beings? Traffic of human beings meaning transporting children, women, human beings for the reason of forced labour or even sexual exploitation. So, this particular article, it illegalizes, that means nobody is allowed to practice trafficking of human beings. Now, Article 25B, it talks about Hindu religious institutions of a public character are open to all classes and sections of Hindus. This particular article is being discussed a lot these days. You can remember this particular issue which is related to one temple in the South India, where women are not supposed to enter that temple. So, this particular article was questioned, because this particular article says that all classes and all sections of Hindus are supposed to move into these temples. So, women are not allowed. So, Supreme Court of India issued one verdict saying that women should also be allowed, but it is still under controversy, because they are saying that certain temples have their own ways, their own deities, and those rules should be prevalent, quoting that there are certain temples in India which do not allow even males to enter. Now, Article 29. What does this say? It talks about the cultural and linguistic minority has the right to conserve its language or culture. Remember that the tribal life, they have their distinct culture and language, that should be protected. The article provides protection to the scheduled tribe communities to preserve their language, dialects and culture. So, dialect is a local form of a particular language. So, they are allowed to use their dialect, their own particular language and their own culture, specific culture to their tribe. They are supposed to follow that. The state would not by law enforce upon it any other culture or language. So, as it was suggested in one of the policies for the tribes, that they can be put under Hinduism or Christianity or any such existing cult. So, this article prohibits it. This article says that they have to preserve their own language, their own culture, and no outside influence should be forced upon them. Now, next article is about Article 46. Here the state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of the people, and in particular of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and shall protect them from any social injustice and all forms of exploitation. So, this particular article takes into consideration the long going on disparity or discrimination against the weaker sections of the society. So, they are providing certain reservations to these people in the areas of social justice or in the areas of economic interest, educational, because these are the areas which will bring these people at par with the other people or the other sections of the society. Article 325 of Part 15, it guarantees to all the citizens of India have the right to vote. So, irrespective of your caste, race, gender, everybody, any adult person of this country is allowed to vote on certain other conditions. Now, Article 330 and 332 and 334, these provide that seats shall be reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the House of People and state legislatures. So, House of People meaning the parliament houses where these people from scheduled caste and scheduled tribes should have a representation, so that correct laws, suitable laws can be enacted, can be approved by the house of people, by the governing authorities. So, the next article is article 335. It covers the claims of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes to services and posts in connection with the affairs of union or of a state. So, any services in the union or in the state, these people will be given preference. Who? Scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. They will have a reservation for the posts connected to these particular states or affairs of these union or a state. Now, article 338 empowers the central government to appoint a commission for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. So, central government if sees there is a need for any different commission to look into the issues. What do these commission do? They look into the issues related to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, any problems they are still facing, any areas of discrimination which is still being practiced, they will look into that and suggest proper remedies. The article 339 empowers the president to appoint a commission to report on the administration of the scheduled areas and the welfare of the scheduled tribes in the states. So, what happens? We have made so many policies, but whether these policies are working for these people properly or not, for that the president can appoint another commission to report on the administration. Administration meaning how are these policies working with the people? Are they working at all? Are they bringing the kind of relief they were aiming at? This the president can appoint a committee for. Then we have article 341 which empowers the president to specify the castes, races or tribes deemed as scheduled caste in a particular state or union territory. We studied about this in the last chapter, that president can specify which are the castes that can be listed in this list of scheduled caste or scheduled tribes or other backward classes. Article 342 empowers the president to specify the tribes deemed to be scheduled tribes in a particular state or union territory. This also we read in the last chapter. Article 164 provides for a separate ministry in charge of welfare of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and other backward classes. So, by providing a separate ministry, we are trying to give them a proper identity and trying to recognize the reality of their problems, so that they can be dealt with in a proper manner under a separate ministry. Now, let us look into the legislative measures for the upliftment of the scheduled castes. Legislative measures meaning laws that are aimed towards upliftment of scheduled caste by our constitution. So, the first one was the Untouchability Offences Act 1955. So, this prescribes penalties for the following offences. Penalties meaning punishment. So, what kind of offences one does will be liable for these kind of penalties. So, what are these offences? Preventing a person on grounds of untouchability from entering a place or public worship. Remember, that was the condition of the scheduled caste, that they were not allowed to enter any place of public worship. Now, this particular act says that they are allowed to enter any places of public worship, offering prayers therein or taking water from tank, well or spring. So, now what was not allowed earlier under the caste system is now allowed under the Constitution of India. Second part is enforcing all kinds of social disabilities, such as denying access to any shop, public restaurant, public hospital or educational institution, hotel or any other place of public entertainment, the use of any road, river, well, tank, water tap, cremation ground, sanitary convenience and dharmashalas. So, all these places that we have mentioned are now open to all kinds of people, all sections of people, and exercising any kind of discrimination here is punishable under the Constitution of India, under the laws. Now, the third part of it is enforcing occupational, professional or trade disabilities in the matter of enjoyment of any benefit under charitable trusts in the construction or occupation of any residential premises in any locality or the observance of any social or religious usages or ceremony. This is the law, the language of the law. So, what are they trying to say here? That anybody of any caste can make any residence in any premises which is open for any kind of sections in the society. So, it is also for the untouchables or the scheduled caste people. They can have their residences anywhere. We had studied in the caste system that earlier they were allowed to make their residence only in the outskirts of the city and not in the middle part or the heart of the city. So, here they are allowed to have their residence anywhere in the city where it is allowed for anybody else. And then another and enforcing occupational, professional or trade disabilities. Remember, they were enforced to occupy, to use a particular kind of occupation only. Scheduled caste will be doing all the menial type of jobs, all those jobs of cleaning which other people will not do. So, this kind of enforcement of occupational or professional disabilities is no more in practice, and anybody who tries to practice them will be again liable for a punishment by the law. Now, the fourth part is refusing to sell goods or render services to an untouchable. So, any untouchable, if somebody refuses to sell goods or render services, that you are an untouchable, we will not do it for you, that is also a punishable offence. So, nobody can deny their services to an untouchable. So, all this has been done, all these 4 things, 4 points that we studied, it is for enlarging the scope and making the penal provision more rigorous. Penal provision meaning provision for giving punishments, more rigorous, that means it is going to be more hard for the people who are offending, for the people who are breaking the laws in these areas. Under the Untouchability Offences Act 1955, but this was comprehensively amended and changed to Protection of Civil Rights Act of 1976. Why was this change? To enlarge the scope and making the penal provisions more rigorous. Now, we take the B part, the Scheduled Caste and the Scheduled Tribes, Prevention of Atrocities Acts of 1989. Prevention we understand to stop, and atrocity, means brutal actions, cruel actions against these scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So, with a view to effectively deal with the crimes against scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and to tune up administrative machinery to tackle the issue, comprehensive guidelines containing precautionary, preventive, punitive meaning which can give punishment, and rehabilitative measures exist which the state or union territories have to follow. So, all the union and state union territories and states have a list of the punishments against the breakage of these kind of rules or inflicting the people with scheduled caste and scheduled tribe any criminal act or any atrocities. They will be under the penal code or under the punishment by the law. In order to see that the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are fully protected from atrocities, government has enacted this act. So, we have already discussed why this act has come into being. It has come into being to prevent the atrocities or the cruel act that was being practiced against these people. You remember the cruel act where they were not allowed to enter particular areas, they were not allowed to live a life of human beings. They were reduced to just being animal kind of a life where they were not treated with dignity. So, that is being considered as atrocities. It specifies the offences which are considered as atrocities and provides for deterrent punishments. So, they are going to specify what do we consider as atrocity, that is also being specified in the law, and what are the punishment associated with what kind of atrocity. So, anybody who practices these kind of atrocities against the scheduled caste will be liable for related punishments. Okay. So, this is the end of all the legislative measures that we have taken up from today's chapter. So, what have we learnt today? The affirmative actions are inclusive policies. So, what are affirmative actions? They are talking about the affirmative actions are inclusive policies to compensate for the lack of equality and injustice. Compensate meaning they are lagging behind these areas, they are long being treated as not equal, unequal. So, we have to now compensate for this lack of equality and injustice by bringing about more equality for them, for bringing about more reservation for them, for these people to come up at a level where we can call them equal to anybody else in the society. The backward classes have suffered for a long time and have become excluded from the mainstream society. So, to bring them back, to include them back, these kind of affirmative actions are practiced. The government of India has tried to bring these sections back to the mainstream society with the help of introducing laws to prohibit the practice of inequality and to uplift them with the help of protection of their civil rights, and by compensating for the injustice they have suffered long with the help of quotas and reservation for education, employment and other social areas. So, basically these three were the areas where they were discriminated against, and to protect of their civil rights. Civil rights meaning they are the civilians as any other civilian of this country, they too enjoy the civil rights equivalent to anyone else. So, for that Government of India has come up with so many articles and laws to protect their rights. So, now let us check whether we have got it right. That means, you have to now answer certain questions as we do in the end of each chapter. So, here you have to answer these questions. Basic questions about the chapter: what are the affirmative actions? Where and by whom was this term used first? Which act of Indian Constitution abolishes untouchability? What does the article 164 stand for? Which act illegalizes forced labor and human trafficking? So, these are the 5 questions. Please answer them for yourself, and we will take them up, the answers to these questions, in the next part that we take up with you. So, till then read this chapter well again, and we will come up with the answer in the next chapter. Sai Ram.